So I wanted to give a quick video impression on my time with Nioh 2, which is currently in open beta for the PlayStation 4. But before I get into that, I think it's important to go back a little bit and talk about the history of these Soulsborne games, particularly my experience with them. The thing that got me through all three Dark Souls games was not the gameplay, it was not the graphics, it was not the combat, it was the story. The story was a very, very engrossing tale, one that I, really plowed through some of these insanely hard bosses, insanely hard challenges, grinded my way through just so I could see what happened next because I was genuinely invested in this minimalist, post-apocalyptic, bizarre reality that I was experiencing. And I'm really glad I beat all three of those games. I thoroughly enjoyed them. They will definitely go down in the halls of great games that I have experienced. From Software struck again with Bloodborne, another phenomenal game that took a lot of the combat elements that were laid out in Dark Souls and turned them on their head, made the game much faster paced, made the combat much more rewarding, the world was much more engrossing. I really, really enjoyed that game as well. But what ultimately happened is what happens with every great genre. People start to clone and emulate it and try to take their own spin on that genre and make, their own game. We saw games like The Surge and Lords of the Fallen and Nioh were three of the prominent ones that rose up from other companies not related to From Software that tried to put their own unique spin on the genre. And in some ways, I think those games succeeded. Nioh in particular, I think, was probably the best of those three. However, I felt that Nioh had a very bland and boring story, one that I did not finish. I did enjoy the combat. I particularly liked the stance system, and I particularly liked that enemies had a stamina bar similar to your own, that if you played particular ways, enemies could, in theory, weaken themselves enough to open themselves up to ridiculous counterattacks, unlike something that you see in all the other Dark Souls games where it was you that were always battling the stamina and resource meter, and this time now you could have the enemies kind of play along in that game with you in a sense. And with some careful rolling and some well-timed dodges, you could cause the enemies to be weak. There were a slew of weapons in Nioh. There were a slew of pieces of armor. There were magic systems in place. There was a very long, drawn-out map that looped and winded around itself with very challenging bosses, very difficult gateways to progress through the adventure. But ultimately, to me, it fell flat because as cool of a protagonist as William was, I just wasn't really that invested in what he was doing. And when I started to get into the later chapters where the game got incredibly more difficult, I found that I would rather be playing other games and having other experiences than grinding through Nioh for a character that I just really didn't care about much, and a story that just really wasn't sinking its hooks into me and making me excited to play it. So that's why I gave up on Nioh. But I have fond memories of it. I particularly like that the game allowed you to play in a higher resolution, 30 frames per second mode, or a lower resolution, 60 frames per second mode, to get some of those really important action sequences down. I think this game needs to be played in 60 frames a second. But even at that setting, the graphics were still phenomenal. Lots of lighting and particle effects, particularly with some of the demons that you fought, how they kind of summoned out of this black mist, and a lot of the clanging of steel and the magic effects that you utilized in your adventure were very, very well done. So I was excited when I saw that Nioh 2 was coming. I think it was a no-brainer that this game would be coming out because the first one was very well received. So I downloaded the beta and I got to play a little bit of it, and I could say, unfortunately, really nothing has changed. Short of the opening part of the game where you actually are not playing as William anymore, you are creating your own character, whether a male or a female, with a pretty nice character creator system. Short of that, there's really nothing different at all. Down to the interface of the menus, down to the HUD, is almost completely identical to the first Nioh. You have the four stances, you have pretty much the same weapons, the inventory management, the set bonuses, the wheel that kind of rotates around when you get to the shrines where you can put points into your leveling system and pick what spell you want to do. Pretty much identical. I would say if somebody did a comparison between the two, short of the main character not being William, the avatar being William, I don't know if you would notice a difference between the two games at all. That is kind of disappointing. It tells me that they didn't really try to expand on any systems in the way that Dark Souls did from 1 to 2 to 3, that they didn't try to make the game any better in terms of some of the UI, that they didn't try to streamline some of the really annoying things that the first game had going for it. The only thing they've added differently is now you can become basically part demon. Even the box art shows a split between like a human avatar and your like demonic form. You even build your demonic form in the character creator portion of the game as well. So they're not hiding that from the beginning. But outside of that, it's identical to the old game. And I think that's really disappointing. Yes, I think Nioh 1 was fun. Obviously, I didn't beat it. But the story structure and the missions, identical to 2, where you get a world map, you get a difficulty from 1 to 5. You can basically click. You get a very generic boilerplate description of, what mission you're going to be partaking on, and you get a very quick cutscene at the beginning of every map, and off you go to the races doing the exact same thing you did in the first one. So for me personally, Nioh 2 is definitely a hard pass. It's something that I'm not interested in. If I feel like I need to get back into that genre, I'll probably just pick up Nioh 1 and continue to play that more. There's nothing wrong with that game, but the fact that 2 doesn't really change or do anything or push the character boundaries or the story boundaries in any capacity whatsoever, I think is a major misstep, and I think it's something that is going to definitely hurt sales. Even annual franchises, your Maddens, your Call of Duties, games like that come out every year, they do at least make an attempt to change something about the game. But to me, Nioh 1 to Nioh 2 is a 99.9% carbon copy. And that's really disappointing because they really needed to do something to break themselves away from the mold. I have no doubt in my mind that Bloodborne 2 is coming. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice was a great game that did a lot to change the tried and true Dark Souls boilerplate, combat system. Even the Surge 2, tried and made an attempt to change the way that they do business. This is clearly a genre a lot of people try to replicate and emulate, and that's good because it's a genre that I particularly enjoy. Unfortunately, I think Nioh 2 just does not push those boundaries far enough. Leave a comment below. Let me know if I've got that entirely wrong. Let me know what you thought of the open beta that was on the PlayStation 4. Let me know if you've pre-ordered, if you're excited for it, or if you see things my way. With that, I'd like to close out this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.